A modern apartment does not cost 5 times more to build in Singapore than in a cheaper city. The concrete is not 5 times stronger. The kitchen is not 5 times better. What the buyer is really purchasing is land, permission, infrastructure, scarcity, and access to the city's economy. In 2026, central property can exceed $22,000 per square meter in Singapore and remain near $7,000 in Dubai. So how much of a home's price is the building, and how much is the city underneath it? An extra $1 million remains unaccounted for after tallying the steel, glass, and wiring. The physical materials and the labor needed to install them remain largely constant across borders. This brings us to the first layer of the price tag: physical construction. High-wage cities certainly pay more for local labor. Strict safety codes, energy regulations, and difficult delivery logistics all increase the technical cost of pouring concrete and tying rebar. But relying on construction costs alone to explain housing markets leads to a fallacy. A developer cannot build an ordinary apartment for almost nothing in a cheap city and then pay 5 times more for that exact same physical structure in a premium market. The base cost is higher, but it rarely scales proportionately with the extreme final price markup. If the interior walls and fixtures represent only a fraction of the closing price, the remainder is paying for the legal rights, infrastructure, and proximity of the city itself. The second layer is land. Land value is not the cost of dirt. It is the capitalized value of everything accessible from a specific location. Take San Francisco. It sits on a rigidly constrained peninsula, surrounded by water, where physical expansion is virtually impossible. Inside of that small geographic footprint sits an extraordinarily productive technology sector. You have a massive volume of highly paid workers aggressively competing for a very limited number of homes near those lucrative employment nodes. This competition creates our sixth layer: expectations and scarcity. Buyers are willing to pay a massive premium because they expect the city to remain globally important, and they know the physical supply of homes will remain tightly restricted. Contrast that model with Houston. Houston's geography is flat and essentially unconstrained. The city accommodates economic growth through outward expansion, building across a vast metropolitan area connected by extensive highway networks. Because Houston can easily supply new land and authorize housing production, the entry price remains low. That affordability comes with hidden costs, like intense car dependence, longer commutes, and heavier infrastructure demands. When you compare a strictly bounded system against one that freely expands, the price difference becomes entirely predictable. Buying a home in San Francisco means purchasing a legal position inside a rare, highly productive economic zone. Houston's abundant land supply dilutes that premium by spreading the demand across thousands of available acres. Layer number 3 is the cost of regulation and delay. In deeply established markets like London, securing permission to build requires navigating complex zoning laws, community consultations, and intricate design reviews. Every month a project is delayed by an appeal or a discretionary review, the developer accumulates holding costs, legal fees, and inflation risk. Because time is literally money, all of that accumulated uncertainty is eventually passed down to the final homebuyer. London also enforces incredibly strict physical constraints on development. Protected heritage views and rigid greenbelt boundaries artificially cap how much high-demand space can actually be utilized for new housing. This chart compares city center real estate. London sits around $20,100 per square meter. Tokyo is near $10,500. Part of this gap is the currency effect. A weak yen makes Tokyo artificially cheaper in US dollars, a discount local Japanese workers do not experience. But Tokyo also possesses a structural advantage. The city continuously permits a massive volume of rule-based redevelopment. When paired with an enormous hyper-efficient rail network, housing demand easily spreads out across dozens of connected urban centers. London's discretionary planning system bakes a permanent uncertainty tax into every new apartment. Tokyo's reliable rule-based construction constantly produces new housing to suppress scarcity. Layer 4 is finance. Developers borrow capital long before they see a single sale. When interest rates are high, holding raw land and carrying construction loans becomes prohibitively expensive. Profit margins vanish, new projects are canceled, and the few homes that do reach the market must be priced significantly higher to compensate. Then comes Layer 5, taxes and mandatory contributions. Infrastructure charges, stamp duties, and specific foreign buyer restrictions are policy levers used to manage international demand and fund city services. Singapore uses these policy levers aggressively to shape its market. To manage its severe physical limits, the government tightly controls land release, utilizes 99-year leaseholds, and applies heavy taxes. The result is a highly regulated, high-priced, but incredibly stable store of wealth. Dubai operates on an entirely different philosophy. It encourages a massive pipeline of private development, welcoming rapid off-plan sales and aggressively transforming raw desert into entirely new freehold urban districts. The outcome is stark. Singapore commands roughly $22,900 per square meter due to its engineered stability and strict supply controls. Dubai sits near $7,200 because of its endless outward expansion. Fixed land generates a premium for safety and preservation. Expandable land generates higher rental yields, but introduces the inherent risk of volatile supply cycles. Neither system is objectively superior. Singapore forces buyers to pay a steep premiums, absolute scarcity, and policy credibility, while Dubai trades immediate affordability for continuous, rapid supply growth. So when assessing why one city costs so much more than another, we must run a 5-question price test. First, how much housing is legal? Second, how long does approval take? Third, how many wealthy buyers compete? Fourth, how much land is accessible? Finally, how much supply actually finishes? This $4 million apartment. The physical construction is a minority of the cost, usually between $250,000 and $400,000. Above that sits the land allocation, running $400,000 to $700,000. Then we add $150,000 to $250,000 for regulation and finance, up to $150,000 in taxes, $100,000 to $250,000 to cover developer risk, and finally, the scarcity premium sits at the very top. This is why simply building more housing does not make homes instantly cheap. New supply takes years, and initial units must cover those massive baseline costs for land and financing. But consistent new construction does eventually compress that top scarcity premium. The physical apartment provides the core utility, but the city determines the market value. A home in a premium city is a spatial contract, the market rate for the legal, economic, and geographic permission to exist there. We don't just ask how much money you have, we ask where that money works.